I'll never forget this night. The pizza place where I worked was about to close, and I was getting ready to head home when the phone rang. I was the only one working the counter that night, so I answered the call. There was complete silence on the other end, so I hung up. A minute later, the phone rang again. I picked up, but it was still silent. I was about to hang up when I finally heard a weak, cold voice, a woman's. She asked for a regular pizza to be delivered. I stayed polite, but inside, I was frustrated. I just wanted to finish my shift and go home. I called out to my boss, letting him know someone wanted a delivery. He told me I had to take it. At first, I was annoyed, but then I realized it meant another tip, and older customers usually tipped well. So, I agreed. I took down the address and told her the pizza would be there soon, but she had already hung up, which I found a bit rude. I yelled at the chef for a regular pizza, and my boss told me to head straight home after the delivery since the place would be closed by then. A little before 10 p.m., I got in my car and entered the address into my GPS. The house was 7 miles away, on a quiet side of town. When I arrived, the place was a small, one-story house on an empty, silent block. I grabbed the pizza and walked to the door, ringing the doorbell. There were no lights on in the house, and I started to worry that maybe I had the wrong address. I rang the doorbell again, but there was still no answer. Just as I was about to give up, I saw someone standing at the window. At first, I backed up, a bit freaked out, but then I moved closer to see who it was. It was an old woman, probably in her late 70s, just staring at me with a blank expression. I yelled through the glass that I had her pizza, but she didn't react, so I shouted louder. Suddenly, a big, unsettling smile spread across her face, a smile that sent chills down my spine. I can still remember the exact look on her face. Feeling more than a little creeped out, I decided to leave. I got back to my car, set the pizza on the passenger seat, and texted my boss to tell him what happened. I started the car, ready to get the hell out of there. But before I could leave, I glanced to my right and saw the woman standing right outside my passenger side window, giving me the same eerie stare as before. I threw the car into drive and sped down the street, not looking back. My boss never made me do a late-night delivery again. This all happened 4 years ago, when I was still in high school. It was my last delivery of the night, and I got into my old 1999 Camry, which was perfect for delivering pizzas. I lived upstate, so all the deliveries were long drives. I remember the sun was starting to set, so it must have been around 7 p.m. After about 15 minutes of driving down dirt roads surrounded by forest, my GPS said I had arrived. The house was an old cottage, almost entirely made of wood, sitting alone in the middle of the woods. The lawn was overgrown, with grass almost up to my knees. I was used to this kind of thing, so I didn't think much of it. I knocked on the door, but there was no answer. I knocked again, louder this time, and within 10 seconds, I heard footsteps inside the house. They stopped at the door, and I started to feel uneasy, like I was being watched. I noticed a peephole on the door, so I called out, "It's the pizza guy." A low, harsh-sounding voice on the other side told me to bring the pizza out back. Something didn't feel right about that. I asked if he was sure, but he didn't respond. I still had the feeling he was watching me. I almost walked back to my car but decided against it. I didn't want any trouble with my boss. Last time I brought a pizza back, he gave me attitude. So, reluctantly, I walked through the tall grass and around the house to the back. There was a shed and a small patio back there, with a table and 4 chairs. In one of the chairs, facing away from me, I saw someone's head. I began walking over and said, "Excuse me," but the person didn't move. I said it louder, but then I heard a voice from behind me, saying, "Over here." I turned around and saw a man peeking around the corner of the house, grinning crazily. "Come over here. I want to show you something," he said. I freaked out and ran in the opposite direction, back to my car, still holding the pizza. I started the car and sped away from there. On my way back to the pizzeria, I pulled over and called the police. Later, I was told that no one had been in that house for a long time. I quit my job a few days later. To this day, I still wonder what would have happened if I had walked up to that man, and I can't shake the eerie feeling of not knowing who or what was sitting in that patio chair. One night, I was doing late-night deliveries in the Poconos, a rural area where I lived. It was dark and foggy as I drove down a shortcut I'd taken many times before. Suddenly, I slammed on the brakes when someone jumped out of the bushes onto the road. The sickening bump confirmed I had hit them. Panicking, I got out to check on the person, a man in a black hoodie, lying motionless by my car tire. I was freaking out, wondering why he had jumped in front of my car in the middle of nowhere. Then things got even weirder. I heard a scream for help coming from the woods to my left. I looked at the man on the ground, still motionless, and, for some reason, decided it was okay to leave him and go into the woods. I moved in the direction of the scream, hoping to hear it again, but there was only silence, except for the sounds of the night. "Where are you?" I yelled. Then I heard the crunch of leaves behind me. Even in the dark, I could make out the figure of someone hiding behind a tree. I ran back to my car as fast as I could, constantly looking back to make sure I wasn't being followed. But when I got there, the man I had hit was gone. I didn't stick around to find out where he went. I just got back in my car and drove off. My heart was racing, but I still managed to deliver the pizza. When I got to the house, a middle-aged woman answered the door. After paying, she asked, "They let you guys have delivery partners now?" I was confused and asked what she meant. She told me, "You've got someone with you in your car." A wave of fear hit me as I turned and saw someone sitting in the back seat. I used the woman's phone to call the cops, and they arrived quickly, but the person was already gone. The scariest part? The police found a blood-stained knife on the floor where the person had been hiding. That memory still haunts me every day, and I can't help but think how differently things could have turned out if I hadn't made that delivery.